Alrighty, this is part two of the reaction to Atun Shei Films, the Psychedelic Apocalypticism of Terence McKenna. Fuck, every time I try to say that, I get worse at it. Oh my god. Yeah, with the last video, managed to stretch 6 minutes and 53 seconds into 30 minutes of total commentary. Under the off chance that Andy sees this one, I hope he appreciates that I'm not just completely aping his video. And for reference, Andy, I know you've seen it because you've hearted several of the comments. I'm the guy who will repeatedly talk about tripping major balls and watching your videos. The idea is deeply funny to me. Yeah, in case you're wondering, watching the In Defense of Puritanism video while on the synthetic equivalent of 6 dried grams was indeed a crazy experience. And it doesn't help that you were also making the video become trippy as I'm tripping, and then I'm having an existential crisis over whether or not that's me, like, losing my shit that much, or if that's like the combo. Whatever, we're gonna get right back into it.
So I don't really like getting stoned. In fact, I've never once used any illegal substance of any kind or done anything illegal ever. But, you know, if I did, then the following things.
I'll have you know, me too. All of my substances, either with the cannabis, are 2018 Farm Bill compliant, containing less than 0.3% of Delta-9 THC by volume. And all of these synthetic research chemicals are non-controlled substances. Please don't get on me again, YouTube. This is for education and harm reduction purposes. I feel like I'm going to have to say that every time because their magic AI bot seems to stop caring if you say that. YouTube TOS is such trash. Oh my god.
This may have happened to me. I smoked a lot of weed in college. I'm very unique in that way. But I didn't like it all that much, and I don't like it anymore. It makes me anxious. The first time that I met psilocybe cubensis, the magic mushroom, was when I was about 19 or 20. My first trip was in a cemetery at night, which could be great if you're intentionally going for a Mary Shelley kind of vibe, but we were not. We were there.
Yeah, that's metal as fuck. That idea is very, very funny to me. Can you imagine?
Because we didn't have any. I'm a fairly neurotic, high-strung individual, so tripping while trespassing, allegedly trespassing, in a dark, scary, unfamiliar place was less than ideal. Thankfully, I had taken pissant amounts, so the experience wasn't too catastrophic, just generally disquieting. Failing to learn my lessons and generally being completely uneducated on the responsible use of these extremely powerful compounds, I took mushrooms a second time, not long after, and had some mild to moderate mental health issues come.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those to where you'll get fuck around and find out. Like, I made sure to not make that mistake. I did extensive research on that kind of stuff ahead of time. I wasn't as responsible as I am now, but I certainly paid attention to warnings on set and setting. And unfortunately, to some extent, that almost made me more nervous. I don't know. I'm a very neurotic person also.
Which was a bit scary, I'm not going to lie. This is reason 1648 why set and setting are so crucially important. I'm a child of the late 90s and early 2000s. I had DARE classes at Wayland Middle School. A local cop named Officer 40 waddled into our classroom, told us to just say no, or something.
Drugs. Some of the big kids do them, but my mom and dad helped get this DARE anti-drug program in our school.
It's run by specially trained police.
The most low-res video I've seen in a hot minute. Remember VHS?
Maybe if we'd been adequately informed about the history and effects of various drugs, then I would have known that you should always take psychedelics in a safe and friendly environment with a sober trip sitter. And maybe I would have waited until I was a little older to start indulging them. Ironically, Terence McKenna would have been a much better dare officer than Officer 40 was.
Yeah, so I intend on probably making a full video pretty soon on the idea of set and setting and proper techniques about actually getting into tripping. The part that makes that subject so challenging is set and setting is far more important for new people than it is for more experienced people. Because once you get used to the experience, once you can kind of flow better on the psychedelics, know how you will respond to it, you can begin to sort of, manipulate it in ways to where sometimes a suboptimal set and setting can be even more transformative. But you're ultimately taking a gamble. Right, so some of my most productive trips were when I was in a very, very bad headspace going into it. But like I said, I can't responsibly recommend that anybody do that until they are very, very conscious and aware of how they're going to respond to this stuff. Otherwise, yeah, you're probably going to want a trip sitter. You're probably going to want to be in a very, a calm place where you're used to it. You might even want comfort items, like have a comfort show available, music you like to listen to. Sometimes just like chilling in bed is enough to kind of make it work through. But you got to be vigilant to this kind of stuff, because if you don't know how you're going to react, that's going to add another panic variable that it has a higher chance of making your time suck.
His advice for the responsible use of entheogens has aged like wine. The first good trip...
I mean, to go back on a similar subject, yeah, Dare did so much damage to people's knowledge and understanding of these substances. Where this sort of prohibitionism, it never works. Right, like, surely I can't be the only one. I did not engage in basically any substances until my mid-20s. And even I, as a child, was like eerily curious about these substances when these like Dare classes or these dumb school programs where they're like hyping up just how bad and dangerous it is. Because it's one of those like, well, how could a rational person engage in this stuff when it's so dangerous? And the reality is many of them are not really that dangerous. I mean, take cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms. It is physiologically impossible to overdose and die on. Nobody was telling you that shit in fucking in like a Dare class. No, they were just lying. It was a matter of control. It was a matter of, with cannabis, frankly, racism. The war on drugs was fundamentally a way to criminalize being like poor and often just being black. There's a lot of bad history there that if you're not familiar with, you definitely need to try to inform yourself on. It's done so much incalculable harm. And then there also is that aspect of like these rebellious kids in like their high school phase and early college will then go to drugs as a way of like a fuck you to the system, where the system did not live up to the expectations. And so then they say fuck you, and then they do reckless shit with these substances. It has done so much harm. It's wasted money, it's wasted effort, it's wasted lives. But no, they just... The war on drugs was one of the dumbest things ever, and we're probably going to end up in another version of that under the Trump administration. It's going to be disastrous.
If I had was in the woods of Pennsylvania, possibly in proximity to a certain historic site, wearing certain historical clothing associated with that site. That was a funny fucking time. After that, I warmed up to the mushroom a bit, but I didn't have a psychedelic experience for quite a number of years after that. Every once in a while, somebody would offer me half a tab of LSD or a shriveled up little shroom at a Mardi Gras parade or something, but that's not a psychedelic experience. The mushroom won't talk to you if you're sweating whiskey ginger.
Yeah, so he says that kind of jokingly, but I can very much kind of confirm this in a different sense. With combining alcohol and psychedelics is just inadvisable. Not because it's necessarily unsafe on its own. Like, it's not fundamentally chemically unsafe, but the combination can make you do more reckless shit. It can make you less aware of just how much you're drinking, and then that can be unsafe. But another reason why you shouldn't combo it is because there just seems to be some sort of like threshold where if you drink with psychedelics, you can't really break through to a higher meaning. You'll get some of the like euphoria and some of the like chill joy from the shrooms or whatnot. But like it caps it out. You can't really go further. As he says, they just won't speak to you. It's very weird how that works. So yeah, general principle. If you plan on tripping, you should not drink that entire day beforehand. I mean, to be honest, you should not drink full stop. There are so many better substances that are far less bad for your innards. I'm still baffled by the idea that alcohol is legal and all this other shit isn't. It's just whichever ones happen to have the power and the established, they were already part of societal norms and one wasn't, and then they got outlawed, and we continue in this hellscape where the only few legal psychoactive substances all like suck. Like nicotine sucks. Alcohol sucks. I mean, fuck, even caffeine debatably sucks. Like it's so much worse compared to a lot of these other like nootropics or other sort of like up and coming psychoactive substances. Like they just suck. We live in the worst timeline.
The story continues in the summer of 2021 when my then girlfriend, now wife, and I went to this beautiful forested place, also quite historic as a matter of fact, and each took, I think, 150 micrograms of LSD. This was a very influential trip for me creatively. I don't know if any of y'all remember the sort of stuff that I was posting in the summer of 2021, but it wasn't normal. True story.
Yeah, so I believe that's from the In Defense of Puritanism video. That's kind of that point to where like that stage of like the coronavirus pandemic was like really where you started to see his content start moving away from like vague centrism with historical aspects into like frankly activist like video essays, and that's when my respect for him increased dramatically. It's clear it had an influence on his content very profoundly. We just didn't really know the answer as to why until now. He probably like alluded to it in other stuff, but like I've never really been in a particular parasocial relationship with many of these content creators where I'm like stalking their fucking Twitter or like going on live streams or like harassing them in the Discord. So like I don't know a lot of the deep lore. So for me, this is when I first found out that change was attributed to the psychedelics.
2 years later, we went to the same place and did it again. Twice in 1 week, actually. The first trip was psilocybin, assisted by DMT. I wrote a journal of that experience, which I will now go ahead and bore you with. We started tripping at around 4 p.m. and started hiking away from town toward the trails. We had tripped here before, and when we entered the woods, there was a profound sense of continuity, like returning to a meadow you loved as a child and delighting to find it unchanged. We stopped at every fallen log and ran our hands over the bark. It seemed like there were many layers of life over this rotting, dead thing. Moss, fungi, insects, what looked like an old snakeskin that had somehow fused to the face of the corpse tree. The layers pulsed madly, seemed to reconfigure into a mathematical grid, then resolve themselves into their original shape at about the speed of a slow heartbeat or a quick breath. 2 days later, we each took about 200 micrograms of acid and went back into the woods. This one was a truly jaw-dropping experience. I've never had trees look back at me before.
Yeah, so that's... If you trip in nature, or if you go outside and you really interact with, like, plants, you get a complete different vibe entirely about the way that you perceive these types of life forms, where it just seems like, yeah, they're, like, looking back at you. If you are a frequent user of psychedelics and you've not done a like nature hike while tripping, you are fundamentally missing out. You've got to try it at least once. Just do it responsibly. Ideally, you're going to want to do that with more than one person. My first trip in nature was solo in a forest kind of near where I live on a full bag of treehouse. That was a very bizarre experience because it initially was very nerve-wracking. But then, like, eventually it had this, like... I kind of got the sensation of, like, this anxiety is pointless. Fuck it, we ball. And then I got, like, weirdly hype. It was fantastic. I was, like, power walking while listening to music. Shit was wild. Truly magical experience. You gotta try it at least once. I need to get out and trip in nature again, like, as soon as possible. I might even do a vlog doing that sometime. We'll see.
I was fixated on fungi during this trip and stopped to gawk at every cap we passed by poking out of the undergrowth. Sadly for my wife, this has continued into my sober life for almost a year at this point. When we're walking the dog, I force my wife to stop at every mushroom we pass by so I can...
Yeah, I would love to see that video. Yeah, so I have a GoPro that I've been, like, really not using enough. So, like, the idea of, like, me just aimlessly wandering the forest, holding this, like, GoPro stick, looking around, and the trees are doing weird stuff. That would be such a vibe. Wow.
Scan it on my Mycology for Dummies iPhone app to see what species it is and satisfy my curiosity. Inspired by Albert Hoffman, we rode bicycles down from the woods to the shore of a lake. It had rained a bit, and the sun was out, and there were rainbows.
So when he first said that the first time I saw the video, the idea of tripping while riding on a bicycle, I was like, bro, what the fuck? But the thing that's weird when you're tripping is it's very momentum based. So, like, if you're laying down and you're tripping while laying down, you get used to laying down and you can't think of it being anything different. But if you're hiking and you're tripping, I'm talking even on a lot. A full bag of Treehouse is 25 milligrams of 4-ACO DMT, or like the equivalent of like 3 dried grams, right? That's not an insignificant amount. I just didn't feel it. It was just, I was in the zone. I was just going, like, fuck it, we ball. Like, it just did not matter. It was weird. So yeah, biking, I feel like you probably could. Once you got used to it, it would just be, that's how things were. It just, very natural in that sense.
More rainbows than I'd ever seen, more beautiful than any I'd ever seen. At this point, my wife went home, but I pressed on. These are some pictures that I took on that bike ride. The sun was going down. The lake was the same color of the sky. At one point, I watched a family of ducks pass in front of the sunset. And I have to say that was one of the most serene and contented moments of my entire life. Oh, and then for some reason I recorded this video.
I'm sorry, Andy can't come to the phone right now. His mind has been taken over by a fungus.
That week kicks...
Yeah, I feel like that's like half of the videos where I'm tripping while doing content. Like, I feel like while I'm, like, during the trip, I make no fucking sense. But then I'll, like, I'll come back to watch the video and then be kind of surprised, like, oh, actually that wasn't as incoherent as I thought it was. But I imagine if I'm doing a trip out in nature, I'm going to record some crazy shit like that.
Started an intense interest in psychedelics in a pretty serious way. And I kind of started having the idea that these compounds are essentially magic. And I know that's such a stoner thing to say, and I'm not suggesting that psychedelics can't be understood in terms of material processes, but you got to admit, their mere existence is extraordinary in the purest sense of the word. It's like we're in a fantasy novel, the premise of which is, it's just like the normal real world, but there are these mushrooms that take people to another fucking dimension.
Yeah, it comes off as, like, very farcical, the idea that this... Why would that happen? Like, why would it do that? It's stupid. Like, it reminds me of, like, a shitty shonen anime, or, like, one of these, like, you know, Hunger Games era young adult novels where it's, like, the world is generally normal, but there's some, like, weird gimmick, and then, like, that's where the framing of, like, the storytelling is from. It's baffling. It's ludicrous. It makes no sense.
It seems like there should be no place for these experiences in a rational, post-Enlightenment world. My next trip was a few months later, and it was with my old friend Psilocybe cubensis. Terence always said that the mushroom was the most transcendent of the psychedelics, and this is why I tend to agree. One autumn day in the early afternoon, I ate an indeterminate quantity of mushrooms. Rest assured, that was the very last time that I did that, and now avail myself of a scale.
Yeah, the scale certainly helps, but, like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I feel like the Psychonaut community needs a big wake-up call on this. The unit of measurement for dried grams is, like, the vaguest possible estimate imaginable. That's also why I tend to prefer the synthetics, because 1 dried gram of 1 cube could have a completely different psilocybin content than 1 dried gram of another cube. So, like, it could be the exact same weight and just be completely different potency. I've only done the real deal a very few amount of times because I don't have a plug. And so, yeah, very vague. And that's just part of how it works. You know, that is what it is. You should still try, but it's very vague. But so I had an experience where it was like the exact same weight. And I tripped 2 days in a row. And the second day was dramatically stronger than the first day, despite tolerance on the exact same weight from the exact same batch. At least with stuff like 4-ACO DMT, like it's milligrams. You know, that shit's weighed so precisely. There are probably ways where it can deviate, but like at least it's like consistent enough that you can do math with, right? Like you can calculate tolerance variables, you can do general math. It's so inconsistent. And then you have these like wacky strains, like, you know, as mentioned in the chat, penis envy or albino penis envy, where they're just like weirdly strong per capita, not even to mention the non-cubensis style mushrooms. What is it, like Sciensis is like weirdly powerful by weight. Some people will be like, oh, well, if it's like especially blue, that means there's more. Not necessarily. It could just mean that you've bruised it more. It could have just been banged up in the fucking baggie on the car ride home from whatever fucking shady plug you got this from in their basement. You're like, you don't know. But it's still worth trying, so...
If I had to guess, I would say that I had eaten about 6 or 7 dry grams, which is an enormous amount, unless you have a tolerance for psilocybin, which I did not at the time. This was one of those trips where you think that you're peaking, only to quickly realize with a sinking sense of dread that you've barely even begun the come up.
Yeah, so that type of experience is a situation that I have had only on a fair few trips, to where the 3 bags of road trip was one of them, the 3 bags of wonder was one of them, and so was the 4 bags of the treehouse. Again, do not do this. Those were all so strong as to not even be particularly useful. But yeah, some of these intense ones to where it's like you feel like, oh, it's leveling out, and then you start getting this like anticipatory anxiety, and it just kind of sits like that for a hot minute where you're just like, I feel like I should be peaking now. Like the math, I'm like doing the math in my head. You can kind of estimate the times, and it just like hits you all at once, and it's, oh.
I've been listening to a lot of Terence lectures leading up to this trip. And as I continued to come up and up and up and up and up and up and up at a dizzying speed, breaking through barriers I'd never even approached before, I realized that it might be a good time to see what all this self-transforming elf machine business was about. Terence had insisted time and time again that you meet entities in the mushroom realm. And I understood very deeply that I was on the threshold of that realm, that if I was going to talk to God or anybody who was out there, it was going to happen now. So I went into my bedroom, I drew the blackout curtains, and turned off the lights. I punched through the dimensional membrane, an odd sensation that feels like falling, and with complete sincerity and openness, I said, "Hello? Anybody there?" Immediately, I was seized by visions of the life cycle of the mycelium. White threads spreading out over substrate, the pins popping up like acne, then swelling into phallic fruiting bodies whose caps unfold grotesquely to ejaculate a cloud of black spores. Then I was suspended in outer darkness, a space between spaces, and I saw this enormous, lumbering, galaxy-sized creature floating by me like a blimp. It was so huge, and I was so little in comparison, that it didn't acknowledge me, but I got caught up in its psychic wake as though I was a piece of litter getting rocked by a passing container ship. I felt myself getting possessed by this entity, almost demonically. The image that flashed through my mind was this creature's essence manifesting as a liquid and filling up all my blood vessels, which was a terrifying sensation, and then receding like a wave as it passed me by and finally disappeared into the blackness of interdimensional space. So yeah, that happened.
Iconic story. So I feel like this is probably a time to discuss the like trip report angle of things. So, what a lot of people who haven't done psychedelics won't understand is like when you see things on psychedelics, it's very odd. It's not like you see them as though that they were there in reality. It's like this weird sort of transient dreamlike state. It's very difficult to describe in terms. And so often telling what happens during these trips can be very challenging because it's just hard to communicate it. I've had similar experiences, but like it's been so when you're in those kind of really intense trips, it's so hard to put to words because it's really beyond even consciousness. It's so odd. And so the thing with a lot of trip reports you see online is if you've done a lot of psychedelics and more specifically a lot of heroic trips, you know that the overwhelming majority of trip reports you see online are total horseshit. Total horseshit. To where it's like, yeah, it's possible that you did see those things, but I don't believe that you remember it. I saw some crazy shit on the 3 Bags of Road Trip and the 3 Bags of Wonder. But it was like this, like, in and out of consciousness, fading between reality. I ceased being a person who could perceive things in a way that was useful. It was just happening. Right, and so, like, to be able to concretely describe it after the fact in language almost comes off as, like, disingenuous. So, like, I get what he's trying to say here. You know, he's trying to put it to words, but it's like, it is so hard to really concrete do that. Have I seen entities? Kind of. Have I spoken with entities? Not in a way where it's like an obvious, you know, like one-on-one conversation. It's more like abstract ideas kind of manifest and kind of come out of nowhere. And it's more of like a dialogue internally beyond language. It's very fucking weird. You'd have to know. Again, like it just... I think the most concrete entity I've seen was like a weird kind of goat horn looking creature. And he was kind of sitting cross-legged, almost in like a yogic meditation stance. And he was kind of just like sitting there and oscillating. And when I saw this, my first reaction was, oh, well, that's fucking creepy looking. But it didn't bother me. It was kind of just like, oh, hey, Jeff, how's it going? And he just did his thing, and he's kind of moving, and then it just kind of faded. Like, it was weird. Like, I felt an energy emanating from it. I felt, you know, different in its presence, but it was just kind of like, oh, sup? You know, you encounter an old friend at the Walmart. Like, it was weird. So, like, in a strange sense, it was almost, like, anticlimactic. Yeah, but, like, with some of these other abstract amorphous entities, yeah, there is almost a nostalgia to some of them. It's very weird. You truly would not know unless you knew. And to even get to the stage where you're seeing entities on psychedelics, you have to be on pretty crazy heroic doses. Or have such a weird tolerance profile where you're getting hit different. So, like, anybody describing that they're, like, seeing entities on less than an equivalent of 3 dried grams, I'm incredibly skeptical of. I don't know. I don't believe some of these people, to where it just seems like they wanted it to be more profound than it actually was, and then they're trying to, like, justify it to themselves to make it worth it to them. And so then they'll, like, share it as though it was, like, it gives off the same kind of energy as, like, people exaggerating the size of the fish that they caught when they went fishing the other day. That's the vibe it feels to me. You either know or you don't know. I wish it were easier to say.
I've since met entities again, including on one trip, which was 1 week ago as of this writing, where I was actually in full conversation with a being made of light in some sort of uterine mind palace, and which I'm still processing. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that communicating with non-human entities that in the moment I am 1000% convinced are materially real has forced me to examine the nature of reality from a new perspective. After each of these experiences, I sober up and think to myself, now look here, my good man. I know it felt real.
All right, shit, I was smoking DMT this morning and broke through. I don't know who or what I met today. Like, for real, I was trying to give me this. It was trying to give me this thing. I don't know what it was. It can't exist. Such an odd morning. On top of that, today I've been wild in general. Yeah, so DMT is on my list, but like I said, I do not have a plug. I live in bumfuck nowhere, Wisconsin. There's a possibility somebody's got it or somebody's synthesizing it, but I don't know them. I feel like DMT would probably be the most efficient, just like, you know, forcing a breakthrough, because it's so intense but so short. You know, it's the businessman's trip, as they call it.
At the time, what evidence, or even halfway good grounds for suspicion, do you have that this is all anything other than a chemical reaction in your brain? The simplest explanation, usually being the best.
Oh shit, somebody's in the Discord but have not spoken. Hello? Can you hear me? How's it going? I do. Can the chat here it looks like it is not going through on the Discord. Give me a second. I gotta adjust the I'm gonna pause. Alright, we finally got the Discord thing working, so the recording is back going. We've got a guest now. We're gonna try to finish up this next segment, and then we'll see if we're gonna continue forward.
Don't you think that when you talk to these entities, you're really just talking to yourself? And yeah, I can't really argue with that. But doesn't it also reek just ever so slightly of hope? A comforting reassurance, because the alternative is simply unspeakable? Well, I don't know. I have to tell you, I really have no fucking idea.
Yeah, I mean, that dynamic is so true, to where it's like, could it just be you talking with yourself? Sure, potentially. I feel like there's almost like a Freudian sort of psychological aspect to some of these different like trip experiences. But at the same point, it's like, I've seen shit and thought shit that I've never even thought to think about before. I don't know where the fuck that came from. You know, like it does kind of come off as cope, where if somebody just like dismisses these experiences outright as just being like, oh, you're just delusional. It's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say. You didn't have that shit happen to you. You know, like it's bullshit. So I feel like having that like level middle ground skepticism, to where you kind of, it could be both or neither simultaneously. I know that's not the most satisfying, but life isn't satisfying.
Yeah, it's back.
Ooh. All right, so I think we will end this segment as video 2, part 2, and then we will jump into doing a little bit more of the next section. I imagine we're going to have to kind of cut that one off in the middle, because soon I'm going to be tripping myself. We will see how that one goes.